G'day guys, back with the Earth Circle. I want to take a moment to just talk about the final episode of Game of Thrones. I have never ever been more disappointed by the ending of a show than I was by this one. And obviously spoilers ahead, but I want to talk about just one character's arc and all the things that happened to them and why I think the ending was very disingenuous to the fans. As you can see by the graphic on the screen, this is pretty much what I think of the show, and I think what the majority of people think of the show as well, considering that it's trending at something like 43% approval rating for Season 8. So, what do I think? Well, obviously the character of Jon Snow is the one I want to talk about today. Here we have a character who grew up thinking he was a bastard, and because of that, he didn't think so highly of himself, didn't see himself like the other lords in Westeros did, because he wasn't one, he was a bastard. Even though he was raised in Ned Stark's household, and he took on the lessons of Ned Stark, and was arrogant to some degree because of his noble birth, but he wasn't like a Joffrey, didn't want people to bow down to him because of his birthright, because he had none. And when reminded by Tyrion that other people weren't as lucky as he was to be trained and, as loved as he was, that he should be a bit more humble, he took that advice on board. And he grew with the seasons. He ended up understanding that he was being groomed for leadership, being the son of Ned Stark and being a skilled soldier, although young. Lord Commander Mormont of the Night's Watch said, "Hey, I'm going to take you on board and train you up to be my successor from an early age." Okay, that makes perfect sense. He takes him beyond the wall, on the Great Ranging. Obviously, events occur, transpire, however you want to put it. He becomes separated from the group, from the other rangers, infiltrates the wildlings and their camp, meets Mance Rayder, gains their confidence, earns their trust, all these sorts of things. Falls in love with her, but knows it can't last, and something's got to give. And in the end, he pretty much lets himself be killed. Once they get over the wall, she shoots him multiple times, but he does get away and brings word to the Night's Watch, tells them the truth, honestly, about what occurred, happy to take any punishment they give him. He then leads another ranging beyond the wall, at great peril to himself, to Craster's camp, or Craster's keep. That goes off. He wins the fight there, doing what needs to be done. Nobody wanted to go north of the wall, and it was practically suicidal to do so, but it paid off. They rescued some friends, killed off some traitors. He comes back to this side of the wall, leads the defense of the wall, and loses his lover Ygritte in the fighting, much to his horror. But he's not a man to easily give in. He instead goes on to become the Lord Commander, not through his choice, but Sam nominates him, puts his name forward for it. And reluctantly, he does this because he's told by people, "Look, you have this ability within you. You were groomed for this by the previous Lord Commander. You can do a lot of good in this position." And he does it. And when he has to do things like ask Ramsay Bolton, the Boltons, to give him men to help man the wall, he does it, even though he despises them for what they did to his family. He does it because he knows it's what needs to be done for the good of everyone. This character then makes an alliance with the wildlings in order to bring them to this side of the wall so that A, they're not providing more fodder for the undead, but also because it will provide more allies on this side that he can fight the forces of the dead with. Okay, cool, makes perfect sense. He then is stabbed in the heart and killed because of these actions. For doing the right thing, he is killed. But then he is brought back to life. Okay, that's a bit of a miracle right there. I mean, it's an obvious miracle. And he's like, you know what? Night's Watch vows is until death. Well, I died. My watch is ended. So he's planning to go off and leave and do his own thing when Sansa arrives and says, "I need your help to take back the North." And he's convinced that it's the right thing to do, to take back the North for everyone. So, reluctantly again, He takes up arms, makes a smattering of alliances, goes to Winterfell, fights the Battle of the Bastards, wins the Battle of the Bastards with the aid of the Knights of the Vale that Sansa calls in. Now, after that, he's proclaimed King in the North by the Lords of the North. Again, not something he asked for, voted for, nominated himself for. He's just given this role. Someone who was just happy to go off and finally live his own life. Okay, he'll do it because he wants to do what's best for the people, knowing about the long night ahead. The Night King is coming. So, he then finds out that Dragonglass is on Dragon's Keep. Well, under the Dragon's Keep. And so he goes, okay, I know to go to Dragonstone, or whatever it's called, where Daenerys happens to be currently. And Daenerys also needs allies, because she's just lost the Greyjoy fleet, and has lost the forces of Dorne, and has lost the forces of the Reach at this same time frame. So he's invited there. He goes there in order to make an alliance, because he needs her manpower and dragons in the north to fight the dead, and he needs the Dragonglass. Obviously, he's willing to trade, hey, I'll help you fight the war against Cersei. Okay, cool. But Daenerys wants him to bend the knee to her, to be subservient to her as the overruler, even though he's king in the north in his own right, elected by his own people. Jon leads a force beyond the wall in what are some silly episodes, in my opinion, but essentially they go to capture a undead warrior, a white, and bring them back and show it off to the people in the south so they understand the threat is real, that the undead are an actual thing, they do exist, it's not just a fairy tale, tall tale, whatever you want to call it. So he does this. Again, says to fly away to the others, goes, I will try and kill the White Walkers, the Night King, here and now. I'm probably going to die, but if it is, so be it. Manages to survive at great risk to himself. Thanks Daenerys for rescuing him and the others, and pledges he will align with her and bow to her in order to win her support to save the world, essentially, from the undead. And so she's like, yep, cool, we've got a plan. He, with all honour, informs Cersei of this, which is foolish, but he's the honourable sort of son of Ned Stark. He does make foolish decisions. He's not a flawless character, which is why people like him, and I like him. He then goes back north. Even though all the Northern Lords are against what he's doing, he tries to do the best job he can. Tries to shore it up. The wall comes down, they fight the forces of the dead. All of a sudden, him killing the Night King that's been set up is taken away from him, and instead it's given off to Arya. Okay, fine, that happened. Then Daenerys' forces move south, and rather than listening to wise counsel that Sansa gives, that, hey, we should rest the men, they're weary from the fighting that's just done, just being wounded, actual real tactical things that real-life commanders take into account, Daenerys insists they move on straight away, and Jon just agrees with her. You see, his character is suddenly being diluted from a person who did things because they were right to a person who just does what the plot demands. In any case, they go south. He says he won't kill the innocent civilians in King's Landing as long as they surrender. They surrender. He stays true to that, doesn't go and rape and pillage and massacre, but the rest of the forces there do. Finally, when confronted with the truth of what Daenerys is, Jon elects to kill her, and then is imprisoned for it before finally being sent to the Wall, and has to live out the rest of his life as an exile at the Wall, and chooses to go north. Now, some people would call that poetic. Okay, cool, he finally gets to go off and live a free life. Well, not really, because it's in the cold, miserable lands of the north. The far north, like the Arctic north. Siberia. I would say there's a lot of problems here, though, because... well, let's take it back a few steps. We find out that he's a Targaryen. Half Stark, half Targaryen. That there's these prophecies of the one who will lead the forces of man against the Night King, Azor Ahai. He'll kill his lover and wield a flaming sword. defeat the forces of darkness. Doesn't happen. That prophecy was set up. It's been in since season 1. Missandei, not Missandei, the red lady, Melisandre. She was pushing that narrative, thinking it was Stannis, but then obviously swaps to thinking it's Jon Snow in season 6, I'm going to say. And that just means nothing. That whole plot line is just whatever. Prophecy, just let's never mention it again, pretend it didn't happen, that it wasn't just set up. Okay. Well, I guess we could live with that. Well, we get to the Night King. Arya has no beef with the Night King, apart from the fact that he wants to kill all life, but those characters have no previous interaction, so that's just taken away from Jon. I don't care that Arya's the one that kills the Night King, but how it was done was terrible. Okay, his character's being a little bit assassinated here, but can't get much worse, right? Well, obviously there's all the stuff with his direwolf, and yes, he was reunited in the final episode with the wolf, except they reused footage from season 4 when he's reunited at Craster's Keep with his direwolf. They literally just cut-pasted in the episode, probably just to shut up fans in an obvious sort of retcon edit after the fact. Yeah, okay, he didn't pat the dog, here it is, shut the fuck up. Okay, whatever. He then obviously kills Daenerys, and people are like, oh, well, what a horrible crime in King's Landing, and the Greyjoys, and the Unsullied, and they're all unhappy about it. Well, hang on. Jon is the rightful king. He's the heir of Rhaegar Targaryen, son of Lyanna Stark. That would mean that Daenerys is a usurper. And killing a usurper as the rightful king is not a crime. Also, the fact that Jaime Lannister killed a king and yet was exonerated for it, and they called him the Kingslayer, sure, but nobody gave a shit. Tyrion, well, he killed the hand of the king, he killed the head of the Lannister family, he also killed Shae, and no, nothing, okay. Release his brother Jaime, of course, well, no punishment there either, so he did bad things, murdered people. I mean, Jon killed a tyrant, people knew she was a tyrant, but we're going to judge him harshly for it anyway. You see, it's very contrived, it makes no sense. Arya kills the entire Frey family, as well as Meryn Trent and a few others along the way. No punishments for her. Who gave her the mandate to just kill the Freys? No one. So, essentially the show is being selective with its punishments. It does nothing for the character. This character was built up. And they're just pissing it all away, and sending him back to the wall is just such a cop-out. And I see a lot of people go, well, you know what, it's like real life, you don't always get happy endings in real life. Let me give you a fucking word of sage advice. Sometimes you do get the happy ending in real life. And many great and powerful leaders around the world throughout history have fought for something and won it. Even if they didn't want it, it has happened. You have famous Roman leaders like Trajan, for example, or Hadrian, neither of which appears wanted to be the emperor, but were chosen for it and said, I will do my duty to the best of my abilities. And they did a fucking good job, Trajan and Hadrian. Then you get Marcus Aurelius, another one, was adopted again, one of the five. All three of those emperors are 5 good emperors of Rome. You get Caesar Augustus, Octavianus, who was obviously the chosen heir of Caesar, but was very much a self-made man, in that, yes, he had money, but he had to fucking fight long and hard to get to the top. And he did some brutal things, some things that are more brutal than what Daenerys did, if we're honest. Augustus was no fucking saint, but he was also a pretty good ruler. The long reign of Augustus is noted for the fact that he was such a good ruler. Alexander the Great, again, did some horrible things, but by 30 had conquered the largest empire in the world. So there's plenty of great leaders out there. William the Conqueror, a bastard son of a Norman noble, becomes the King of England and the Norman lands in France. That's a pretty good fucking run. You see, not everything has to end with a miserable fucking ending for people. Especially at a young age. Like, sure, William the Conqueror died fat and they had to stuff him into the coffin. So what? That's a Robert Baratheon death right there. The way Game of Thrones is wrapped up is like, for those who know the history, the Wars of the Roses, which is very much the inspiration behind a Game of Thrones. It's like if Richard III and Henry Tudor fought at the Battle of Bosworth Field and Richard died, Henry lives, but Henry is then imprisoned or sent away to Scotland or something for the fact that he fought in a battle where Richard was killed, and then some unknown cousin of his becomes King of England, and Wales then leaves the Kingdom of England in the 1400s. Doesn't make any sense, does it? But that's what's happened in the story of A Game of Thrones, and that's why people are pissed, and that's why I'm pissed, and that's why I made this very off-topic video for this channel. I know a lot of people have asked me before to talk about what I think of Game of Thrones. Well, now you're getting it. This is just 15, 16 minutes, I guess, of me saying this is one character and their one plot line and how it makes no sense in the big scheme of things. What should have happened, realistically, in this horribly rushed abortion of a fucking season, was this. The Night King broke down the walls at the end of Season 7, or the wall, and is moving south. The forces of the North should have tried to fight him at Winterfell and lost, and had to retreat south. Now, it shouldn't be that they're fighting the wall of super zombies from 28 Days Later that run and scream and are a tidal wave that wash over each other. That was an invention of the show, that just when they needed it to be, that's what they were like. But in other episodes, they're just slow, shambling corpses. It's whatever they feel like at the time, really. The battle should have been at Winterfell, and they should have lost. And perhaps lose some of the dragons there to the Night King, or lose one of the dragons to the Night King, and they fight further south, and they retreat south to King's Landing, and it forces Cersei's hand that she has to get involved because the dead end up on her door. Arya should have snuck into King's Landing after they win the fight, and Jon... It should have all gone down at once. Jon has to kill Daenerys in the fight. Perhaps she's being turned into a White Walker. She's stabbed by one or something and turning her into a White Walker. And to put her out of her misery, Jon stabs her through the heart. Tears streaming down his cheeks. Oh my, what have I become? When he pulls out his sword, it's flaming. Azor Ahai, the legend fulfilled. He then fights the Night King and kills him. In the aftermath, Cersei's there, swirling the glass of wine. Arya sneaks up from behind, kills her. Bam. Arya's plot is paid off. She gets her revenge on Cersei. Jon, plot paid off. Kills the Night King. Bam. Dany killed off. Not because she's a vicious, murderous tyrant, but because a bad thing happened to her. And maybe her impetuosity, her anger getting the best of her, puts her in the situation where the Night King kills her. So, she's dead. Jon's now left. People find out he's the heir of Rhaegar and Lyanna, and also he's the one who's responsible for turning back the forces of the dead. And he then becomes the king of Westeros. Sansa can be the warden in the north. Nothing wrong with that. So, see, she still gets her northern kingdom. It just makes a lot more sense to run the story this way. But that is not what the show creators came up with. What they came up with was just bad. Because here you have Jon, who's responsible for saving the entire world from the dead. His actions. He saves the North from the Boltons. He saves the Seven Kingdoms from the reign of Daenerys. And he's brought back to be king? No. Kill the Night King? No. Rule the Starks and the North? No. Well, what the fuck was he brought back for? To ride off into the miserable nothingness of Siberia? It makes no sense, guys. And the fact that I can come up with a better story, in my opinion, off the top of my head like that, it just goes to show how little they cared about this season. And a lot of the problem was the fact that, like Rian Johnson and Star Wars, Dumb and Dumber just wanted to subvert expectations. They were constantly talking about subverting expectations. Like, everyone expects Jon to kill the Night King, so we had Arya do it. But as George R.R. Martin himself has said, he said, if you're writing a murder mystery novel, and you've decided the Butler has done it, and you write your novel series, and you drop all these hints and clues that the Butler did it through all the books, and then the fans figure it out, because some will. And then you decide, well, now they know, I need to change it up, because, surprise is more important, and then you make it someone else in the story. well then the whole story doesn't make sense anymore. And that's exactly what has happened with the Game of Thrones. They decided, hey, Jon, people realise he's the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. Oh, well, let's not have him kill the Night King, though. That's too obvious. Oh, fuck. Arya doing it is cooler. Let's have her jump 30 meters through pitch blackness over the top of White Walkers and the forces of the dead. Somehow, it's not set up in any way. She just does it, I guess. Because the people who wrote the show, they're from the Kurtzman school of writing, which is plot first, characters second. And a lot of movies do this. It's a pet peeve of mine. People on this channel will know how I hate shit stories. And that is where they come up with the beginning and the end. Think of it like a map. You want to drive from point A to point B. There might be 16, 17 different roads that all lead to there that you can take. Some are branching and winding, some cross over each other, and sometimes it's just this direct road, the very boring, bland highway that goes from A to B. They chose the bland, boring highway. And what they do is they just go, we need to get this result. Therefore, we will make all of our characters just be tools in our story in order to get from result A to result B. Instead of letting the characters' actions dictate what the outcome of B is, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm pissed. We had a really good show, and in my personal opinion, I think the best way to look at it is just the wall came down at the end of Season 7. What happened after that? Who knows? Maybe my own headcanon. Because it was a pretty good show up till then. Season 7 definitely had some big problems. Season 6 had a few problems, but it also had some good moments, some good episodes. But up till the wall coming down, I was okay with it. Season 8, on the other hand, myself and my wife are both there going, this is fucking atrocious. So, and the fact that most of the internet is that there's a petition with, at the time of recording, 1.3, 1.4 million people just saying to HBO, what the fuck have you done? You should remake Season 8. Knowing that they won't, I'll add, the people who did the petition have just done it to say, fuck you, which good on them, I'm all for that. It's basically what I did with Forge World. When I did our petition, I said, hey, Forge World, what are you doing here? You've just jacked up prices all over the world, and they're nowhere near what the conversion rates are. That's not right. Sometimes you just got to make these petitions just to send a message, even if they don't give a crap about it at the other end. It at least is some sort of cathartic release for you, the audience. Anyway, let me know what you think below. The fact that Jon gave his lover, Ygritte, he gave his other lover, Daenerys, he gave his life for the North, he gave up his crown for the North, he gave up being Lord Commander, he gave up all these things just to be treated as an exile, never mentioned or thanked by anyone for his actions. Nobody came up and shook his hand at the end of Season 8 and said, thank you for everything you did to defeat the army of the undead. No, nothing. Just fuck off. We'll never mention you again. And your cousin, who nobody gives a shit about, who hasn't been set up to be the king, who said he can't be the Lord of Winterfell because he's not a man anymore or something like that. Yeah, no, he can be king. And yeah. And I mean, they could have ended it with Jon saying, I'll be king for at least a short while, get the kingdoms in order, and then I'll resign my crown, abdicate, and head north with the Wildlings. That could have been an end to the show as well. The Seven Kingdoms will be in good hands until it recovers from the war, and then Jon will pass it off to a worthy successor, much as how the Roman emperors, in at least the time of the good emperors, would choose their heir rather than it being a blood relative of questionable leadership ability. What a slog. See you all next time.